more they talk to us about it, better. Some announcements really quick. We've been asked if we can get copies of the documents that we are working on during the day we're having, especially our working meetings, when we're looking at ordinances, or PRD, or anything like that. Check with Mary, we can do that. Get some copies probably for our next meeting. They're on one of them. We'll ask you to return them at the end of the meeting. But while we're working on things, you guys get a couple copies of them for the public attendees to have. I'm also going to try to do a better job with the agenda, be a little more specific on what it is we're going to be working on, the days that we meet. The agendas are pretty vague because things are always subject to change. So as long as we can all acknowledge that we can't promise that that's what we're going to work on, but at least we'll have a goal and target for what that's going to be. We're going to try and start doing that, so I think that's a little bit better than we have. As far as the agenda goes, I'll order, and so the first item of business is approving the June 2025 meeting notes. Everybody get a chance to look at those. Tom sent them out last week. Anybody have any comments on them? Remember things differently? Request the required changes? Okay, so somebody second the motion.
Second that motion.
So a motion to approve the 24 meeting minutes is approved. So we'll work on it also. So approve the whole thing. Okay, so let's have a vote. All the members. Agree? Okay, Mr. Stecker. Apologies. I'm new to this. I just what it is. I'm not trying to figure this out. It's okay. You gotta go officially. All right. So the July 8th working group meeting minutes. Anybody have any comments or concerns or disagreements with those in them? Move to approve. Move to approve. I get a second. Second. Okay. We all agree then? We get a vote on that? Say all in favor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. It'll get better. All right. So at this point, I would like to open up the meeting for public comments. Is anybody that wants to say anything, has any input, feedback, suggestions for the planning commission? Be interested in hearing them?
You have two separate line items here on the thing for public comments, one at the beginning and one at the end.
Correct.
So there's going to be public comments at the end also?
That's correct.
All right.
It's a new format that I introduced or implemented. Rather than have discussions during the meeting, which just slows our group down, we're going to allow comments at the beginning, and then at the end of the meeting, if you guys want to summarize it, and constructive feedback and input, things you want to suggest to us, we'll close the meeting with additional comments.
I'll save it for you.
Okay. All right. So new business. Now we're going to have a presentation from the Route 19 Corridor Committee. Bill Frank was our chairman of that committee, and put together a pretty big slideshow. And he's going to be presenting that to the Planning Commission for our awareness. This study was commissioned by the Board of Supervisors. So this is more like a courtesy briefing to us on what we're looking at, what they came up with, what they're recommending. Just a little bit of context and don't go into more detail on it. You know that Lancaster Township is going to be developed. It's going to be a long-term type of thing, but we can't, if we fail the plan to fail is basically how it goes. So we looked at it, and the committee came up with some recommendations on how we can at least keep Route 19 in some reasonable order, and not just have, for lack of a better word, the wild west where everybody comes in and does what they want to do. It's a mixed use zoning, which means there can be a lot of variation in what goes on there, and we're trying to just standardize it. So we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you. Can you guys hear okay? I'll try to make it as loud as I possibly can. Phil Frank is my name. I was on the committee, streetscape committee for the Route 19 corridor. And this presentation summarizes the recommendations that we have made.
That's the recommendation tonight, right?
Correct. So the goals of the committee were to work in conjunction with the current zoning. The current zoning calls out a 50-foot setback for any new construction along Route 19, and that's a no-pave setback. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. But the streetscape that we're proposing works in conjunction with that. And essentially what it's intended to do, goal number one, is to provide a buffer, a visual buffer between development along Route 19 and the roadway itself. The secondary goal is to provide a consistent image for the township. And that image should reflect the desire that was expressed many times during the comprehensive plan discussions to maintain a rural feel and as much green space as possible in the township. So that's our secondary goal. And obviously, the better job we do when it comes to maintaining that quality appearance along that roadway, property value is going to benefit. So those are the three goals that we were working to achieve. And as we go through this presentation, we're going to talk about the details of the specification, and also, maybe even more importantly, the importance of enforcing and strengthening the current zone. And that impacts a lot of what's going on here, I think, with regard to the saldo and some things that are being discussed. And you'll see why that's important. The current zoning ordinance, that zoning ordinance number 89, was drafted in 2008. And under section 406, that's where it talks about the Route 19 corridor. And it identifies the 50-foot setback, and more importantly, it identifies a 50-foot no-pave zone in that setback. In other words, the goal of the folks that put this together back in 2008, from our reading of it, is that they're trying to avoid the situation that you have along Route 8, for example, where you have parking lots right out to the edge of the road and problems that come with that. So we identify, or we understand that no pave zone to mean green space, but I think that needs to be defined better as you guys work through your saldo requirements. Because none of this works if that green space doesn't. So where does this apply? And we'll get into some details. It applies to any new subdivision, or it would apply if it's approved. Has not been approved yet, but if it's approved, it would apply to any subdivision or land development along the Route 19 corridor after the ordinance is approved. And this streetscape that we're talking about would be located along the Route 19 facing property line within that corridor, and it relates only to new development. There's a grandfather clause that we're recommending, so it does not impact any existing residences or any of this existing structures or commercial development that's there today. Now, what we found and what we suspect will happen is when people start to see the benefit of this, people are going to start to adopt it as part of their landscaping plan for existing properties. You see Andrew Matarko has started to do that. So in the ideal situation, what you have is as much green space as possible within that 50-foot zone. And what we're recommending is the white fence and planting arrangements that you see detailed here. And really that comes from the surrounding landscape features that exist now. You know, when you travel out Whitestown Road, that's what you see. When you travel up Camp Run Road, that's what you see. When you travel out part of Stockbridge Road, that's what you see. So we're trying to maintain that and enhance, expand on that look. That's the rural character that people talk about, and it's also the green space that really enhances the appearance of the township. And here's what the layout looks like. The highlighted green area is the 50-foot setback that currently is in the zoning. The 50-foot setback starts at the edge of the right-of-way along Route 19. So that right-of-way varies. In some cases that's a 60-foot, in some cases that's wider, in some cases it's narrow. But we start at the edge of the right-of-way, and that green space is enhanced by the streetscape that we're proposing here. And there's also a walkway shown that the supervisors have requested, the inclusion of a walkway that runs north-south through the corridor, so that over time we can establish some multimodal transportation capability, either some walkability or some bikeability in some of these areas. We don't expect that to run the complete length of the roadway, but we do expect there'll be areas where development becomes more substantial, and you'll see the benefit of having some walkability. Here's an elevation view of what that would look like. The fence line would have smaller shrubbery in front of it and larger trees behind it. And hopefully there's some additional planting and some additional tree requirements and greenery requirements that the Saldo brings about within that 50-foot space. Because this little 10-foot fence line isn't enough. But it does establish a look that will benefit the area. And then there's a comprehensive drawing that's part of the package, and we've provided a couple of copies here for the group, but also for Tom Thompson. The walkway, this is sort of what you're going to expect to see as you get townhouses and things, for example, that are developed along that roadway. You're going to see some nice greenery, a walking trail, a fence line, and a reasonable buffer between whatever commercial development we have in the roadway. Again, this doesn't work without a buffer. It doesn't work without a significant green space. Now, we also recognize that there are places along the Route 19 corridor where land doesn't lend itself to this. So there's an exclusion where you've got steep slopes. And we work with Tom Thompson to identify those. There's some of that down on the Saltworks Road. There's some of it in some other areas where it's just too steep to do this. So in those cases, a natural wooded barrier would be an acceptable alternate to the plantings that we're talking about here. The trees that were selected for behind the fence is a flower crab apple. Those provide nice greenery in the summer, nice flowers. They're very, very hardy in this climate, and probably more importantly, they stay under the height of the utility lines that come into play in some areas along the roadway. So they tend to stay low enough that it's not going to cause a problem for us in that area. As far as the shrubbery and the planting around the fence itself, in front of the fence we have a mixture of burning bushes that we recommend, along with the golden lace junipers, so that in the wintertime there's greenery that's left. And it doesn't, in the winter you don't lose all your leaves. There's a planting guide that is included in the package here that talks about spacing, and it talks about tree sizes and shrub sizes and all those kind of things that are recommended. We got these recommendations from a website that Pennsylvania government puts out called Treescape PA. So they recommended certain types of plants, certain sizes, things like that. Now, this is a 10-foot wide streetscape. So depending on the surrounding environment, what it looks like, we're recommending there's some variety of different surfaces that can be used, whether it's grass or mulch or natural stone in that area, depending on what the surrounding landscape looks like. And that would be up to the property owners themselves. Then the fence itself, we specified the fence. It's a commercial grade, heavy gauge vinyl fence. So it will survive weed whacking and maintenance. It doesn't require painting. It's a long life fence. It is available in the X pattern that matches some of the other areas around the township that already exist. And the detailed drawings for that fence are provided here, so that essentially what happens is when a commercial development is being proposed, the township office can provide this document to that developer, and they'll know exactly what they have to do to meet the streets. We're also recommending that the township purchase entry signage on the north end and the south end of the township, and that signage would follow this same design basis. It would have that white fence look. There's a detail of what we're recommending for the signage, and we think that would be what we're trying to do here. I mean, you can see as you look at this, what we're trying to do is make Lancaster Township stand out from the typical anywhere USA commercial development that you see it. You drive up Route 8 and nobody's too impressed. Here we want people to drive through the township and notice, well, that's a little bit nicer. So that's what we're trying to achieve here, and that's really a combination of some consistent features and green space. Green space is the key, especially along a commercial roadway. There's a list of the committee members who were involved in this, and Anybody has any questions specifically?
I have some questions. So this is recommended just strictly for 19, correct?
This is just for Vandy.
As you had said about off of Whitestown Road and some other roads. So it's
No,
just-
all we're saying is that when people drive through the township, they're heading up to the restaurants or whatever, and they see Whitestown Road, they see that fencing, everybody commented on it. They're like, man, that looks nice, that's a nice look. So we're trying to build on that throughout the area, and I think it would be something that might be desirable for developers along, Stockbridge or wherever, in the future say, hey, this is kind of a nice look, we should incorporate the same thing. And, so that's kind of what we're after. We're after kind of a consistent look that somebody traveling through Lancaster Township knows they're in Lancaster Township.
So I got several questions, sorry.
Yeah.
Is this particular for commercial property to start with? Or if somebody buys an existing house and do some additions to that, then they have to do it? Or is this strictly commercial?
No, the way this works is that it's not strictly commercial. It applies to, we described it here, Tom Thompson came up with the exact wording for this, but it covers any subdivision or land development that's new after the ordinance takes effect. So everything that's existing, it would be totally voluntary and it's excluded. But anything new, this would be part of the requirements for that 50-foot setback. We're not increasing the setback, we're not doing anything with that, we're just providing some more definition of what that setback should look like. And
So if a commercial property is sold, is that considered then new because you got a new owner?
only if it's changed.
So if you do one little change on it, then,
Well, that has to be defined what that means, but the whole grandfathering situation, what we do need to do is, and I think you can see it as you drive up Route 19, there are properties that don't have the 50-foot setback. There are properties that don't have the green space. And we're trying to minimize that moving forward with anything new, so that we can improve, everybody will benefit from this. Because this, when you compare some of the streetscapes that were done in Cranberry, for example, much more costly than this. They've got lighting, they've got brickwork, they've got foundations and masonry, they've got metal fencing and brickwork, all kinds of things that don't fit the look that we're looking for up here, and we don't need to spend that kind of cost. So this cost is insignificant for somebody who's doing a new project development, but it does go a long way to helping provide a consistent image and improve the look of that group.
Is the pedestrian pathway, is that mandatory as part of the?
Yep. The board of supervisors has requested that to be made.
I'm sorry, what was in that?
The pedestrian pathway is mandatory as part of the upgrade,
You can see that,
even if it's commercial.
here it is there. We're showing it's a 5-foot minimum pedestrian easement walkway. The location of it, there's a description in here that leaves the location is flexible. So depending on if it's a residential area, for example, we have like this, where you have a townhouse development, that walkway could be part of the sidewalk system through the townhouse. So we're really trying to make it flexible, but the bottom line is that if you talk to anybody under 40 years old, they're going to say walkability is real important. They want that sense of walkability. You know that from anything you do. So sidewalks, walkways, that's where everybody goes.
On following that up, Matt, maybe in 50 years you'd have it from one end to the other, but to start with, you're gonna have, it's gonna be so disjointed, and to me, having a walkway does not enhance the rural feel of the community.
What-
It's wet.
We talked about that, everybody agrees, everybody knows that. But what does start to happen is that, there's gonna be a lot of homes going up here. I mean, don't kid yourself, there's gonna be a lot of homes, so there's gonna be a lot of commercial shops and things that are going in. There's gonna be little clusters of these shops and commercial developments that are built along Route 19 initially. It's gonna be like you see down at all of these. You're gonna have little clusters of that throughout. And you want to make those clusters walkable from end to end. So if you have 4 or 5 businesses together, you want to be able to walk between them. And it's certainly unrealistic to think you're going to have a walkway initially all the way up. But as a planning commission, if I was running a sewer line somewhere, I sure want to maintain a pedestrian easement as part of that sewer line. And if that runs up Scholar's Run, that sounds like a win, and all of a sudden it ties into one of these, and it ties into the log cabin, and before you know it, you have kind of a walking easement, walking path that starts to have some functionality. And that's really what we're trying to do here. Like Andrew was saying, on his property coming up, the walking trail, the goal would be to tie it into Arden Woods in some way so that it all sort of works together, starts to work together as a trail system or a walking path system that people can start to use. So it's a long-term thing, no doubt.
Another question on that. Has anybody checked into insurance for the insurance, the liability insurance be increased to the owner of that property because the walkway is on his property?
It doesn't seem to be an issue. We did discuss that. It doesn't seem to be an issue with a typical walkway, typical pedestrian pathway. Somebody needs to look into that further, but as far as we can tell, it does not.
Sidewalks for just about every business in other townships. We're not hearing that there's any big concerns with additional liability insurance. It's a pretty standard requirement in many other townships.
We're not going crazy on it initially with lighting, things like that. At some point, if you look at the comprehensive plan, what you see is that village district that's sort of in the West Lancaster Road area on the plan. Maybe at some time that becomes a little more of a pedestrian friendly area. That would be a separate issue from this.
Like right now, right through Middle Lancaster here, you'd have a tough time putting
You'd have a tough
any
time.
sidewalks.
But if you look at the comp plan identifies the area north of that as a village district. So is that going to happen? Who knows? But maybe if it does, it becomes a little more water.
The other thing about that is the village district, if it doesn't change, nothing's going to happen. There's no requirement. If somebody come in and want to put a development in the village district on the frontage, they're going to have to acquire a lot of those buildings to change them. And when that happens, then this will get. The likelihood of that happening is not very high.
We would be crazy not to plan for something like this, because if you look at, and all you have to do is look at the difference between Route 8 and Route 19 in Pine Township. You look in Pine Township and you see a lot of greenery, the auto dealers are set back a little bit from the road, all the businesses are set back a little bit, you have sidewalks, you have a lot of trees, you go on to Route 19 or Route 8, you don't have any of that. It's a sea of asphalt as far as you can see. And the property values are much higher in Pine Township than they are on Route 8.
Couple comments. In general, I like the plan. I think it's a very nice plan. I think for implementation purposes, though, I think the codification of this is very important. And I would highly recommend that clarification of it will be done in conjunction with the zoning, buffer yard, ERD, everything else. So we have a comprehensive, agreeable pack that goes out, that all agrees together, rather than a piecemeal ordinance here versus the other ordinances. I think what you've got is a great foundation, but the actual codification of it should be consistent with the rest of the codification.
That's why we're talking to you guys now.
Okay.
Because if you look at this, if you look at that zoning 406, what's a no-pay zone? What is that?
Yeah.
What's in, is it, we read that to being green space. But does that mean concrete, not asphalt? You know, does that mean gravel, not asphalt? What does that mean? I think we better be clarifying that because it's not too clear.
No, I agree. I think what you've got here is a great conceptual plan. I see a few inconsistencies. Like you've got a 3-foot fence height here and a 54-inch fence height in red detail. So
That could be. We have a few amateurs pulling these drawings here.
that's fine. This should all turn into an ordinance that is consistent, compatible with the rest of the ordinance collection.
I agree with you, Bob. 4 weeks ago, we discussed the boundaries and what are trees and shrubs and how much. And I think Route 19 corridor kind of, we could fit what we discussed in there with the Route 19 corridor.
And I understand your concerns with this is going to be very piecemeal. You're going to have a sidewalk there, sidewalk there. But the reality is you have to start somewhere. If you never start, you'll never get there. And yes, it's for the first 5 years, it's going to look like, what is the point of this? But, you know, that pay down the road, it's going to start happening. And you have to start somewhere. So, I like the plan. I think a little bit more fleshing out and things like, for example, I like a little bit of meandering sidewalks. I think the code should allow for some meandering. I think the code should allow for integrated into the sidewalks and development.
We try to say that in here.
Yeah, so, but no, this is a great concept guide. But that has to turn into strict code. It has to turn into some hard piece of code. And those details.
So that it's going to be the triggering event, you know, for the development.
Yeah.
So is it renovation of a certain percentage?
Yeah, all of that has to be codified.
Has to be fleshed out.
But I think that the
You
goal
can't
and
use
the concept.
putting a new roof on there, facility, that's be something more than that. Trigger.
In very precise details in that codification. For example, I have seen meandering sidewalks that are a disaster. There's a residential development down in Pine, actually, and they do a nice meandering sidewalk. And all of a sudden, a couple of residents, the concrete guy did a meandering sidewalk. It's a horrible meandering sidewalk. So the point is, there's got to be some guidelines in the codification of the ordinance itself.
But like
the
you can
concept is
see,
great.
flexibility like this makes sense.
Oh, no, I have no problem.
I agree.
I just know that it has to turn into hard language. It's enforceable and definite that people, developers know exactly what's expected of them and how it's to be done.
That's our job. Once the board of supervisors, because they want this included, comes to us again.
Okay.
So the PRD, the zoning ordinances, we build all the details. This is the concept.
Now, another concern I have, this is a minor concern, and that has to do with the trees and power lines. I have seen power line issues where they're just going to whack them off over. So I would hate to see us in a situation like that. I think we need some definite clarification of what we can and can't do under some of these other lines.
Yeah, we did look at that, and it's not a universal situation where we're under power lines. There's occasional areas where we are, and maybe we build into the ordinance a little bit of a shift to try to, because you move 5 feet back, and you miss the power line.
Maybe, but when they come in for pruning, they're going to whack that and they're going to cut a big chunk out of your tree. It's not going to look so pretty. So there's some of that that has to be thought of. True.
That's why
Yeah, it's a 20-foot tall tree, so we're trying at max. So we're trying to stay under that, and hopefully.
That would still typically meet your except you typically can't put much trail on a sanitary line.
You can put a gravel trail.
Maybe. Depends on who. Bassett does not allow me to put any kind of a structure. Any kind of a structure that they're gonna have to maintain on top of the right of way for a sanitary line. Because they don't wanna be responsible if they have to dig it up, put it back to that. So I don't know what Western Rutland County Authority's requirements are. But it's not a big deal, I'm just saying,
It just,
we can't just blanket say that we can do that. It may or may not.
no, for us, we identified that as a potential opportunity. If you look at, you know, obviously the sewer line in the future runs up Scholars Run Road, you know, you got this relatively nice wooded area that we're running through. We're digging it up anyway, you put a gravel trail there, and, you know,
I
I think
understand.
that's pretty much of a win if somebody pushes that.
If you can, I'm just saying it may not be available. They may not be available in Western Rutland County. I do not know. I know Bassett will be
I think you're at risk. If they dig out.
Bassett is not equivalent.
But if it's a gravel trail, you know, maybe there's some negotiation there that you have.
So it's not a showstopper, I mean, it's just a point of, it may or may not be able to happen. I like the concept, I think you guys did a good job.
Yeah, that's a great concept. I was in Ohio, and every time I go there, I notice the streetscapes in central Ohio. You know, a lot of it's in horse farm country. It has a really nice aesthetic feel. When I saw Andrews, I was really impressed that he put it in front of the police station. But my first feeling was the fence was too high. It was like, it looks like it's, and I
Actually, what happened, I think, is.
I don't know if that's an aesthetic thing, but I like fences being like, you know, so, you know, they're not taller than you. They're just because I think they get too tall, they're boundaries.
Yeah, it seemed to me that it was too high also the way it was installed.
I don't know if it's because of
I think it's because of the slope up.
just
I think the
kind of
fence
aesthetic.
itself isn't any higher, it's a slope up, it makes it look.
And the trees are smaller in respect, so.
54 foot, 54 inch high fence is a little higher than normal.
So maybe we go from be able to make it a slightly different, you know, height. Those
It's
are,
an aesthetic for me.
you guys can do whatever you want. We're just trying to put an idea out there.
I think that was just my first response.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I thought the same.
It does kind of block the police station, you know, privacy.
When you start tying a bunch of those together, all of a sudden it starts to look like something.
So for the residents who aren't aware, Andrew Tarko, you know, put that famous streetscape in front of the police station. It's not 100% finished, it doesn't have a walking trail, but the fencing and shrubbery and tree plantings are a prototype of what we're proposing. So he was willing to do that at his cost, show us, show the township what it is we're planting. So if you go by, you drive by the police station, take a look at it. The shrubs are all very small, everything's young, but give it a couple of years, and I think you'll see it evolve into something.
Is he planning on putting it in front of the rest of his apartment there?
I don't know.
Who's doing it there, boss?
That was Andrew Tarko. Put in front of the police station. I think, I don't want to speak for him, I don't know if he was gonna put it in front of the storage location also. I don't know, he didn't agree to put it in front of the police station as a building.
Any other questions? Anybody?
About the 50-foot setback, what's that doing with the curative amendment that they don't want 50-foot
Okay, those are essentially two different things. The 50-foot setback for this is from the right-of-way to the building line. The setback, the curative amendment, the Wrigley plan was the distance from the roads within the plan to the buildings. And they asked for a variance in that, or a curative amendment to make that distance less because it was flawed in the ordinance. It really wasn't.
Do we have your name for the minutes?
Pardon?
Do we have your name for the minutes? This meeting.
Yes, my name is Norma Hanford,
Okay.
former solicitor
Thank you for your service. Okay, any more comments from?
Yeah, I like to. My name's Tom Beach, 661 Scott Ridge Road. I'm reading here, basically the presentation that was originally brought up in May talks about white horse fencing, sidewalks, trees added along the 19 corridor. After seeing this presentation, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for letting me speak. A lot of people are going to be like, I'm going to try and be very direct. Wow. Just wow. I can't believe this. This is Mission Creek. Oh, we're going to just put the sidewalks in front of where we're developing, and then people are going to add on to it, and then we're going to have a hole here and a hole there, and it's going to be gingerbread, checkerboard. Is it going to go up one side of 19, or is it going to be on both sides of 19? Are we going to have 19 be a corridor all the way up and down? Looks like homeowners association to me. Who's looking for this? Look, everybody keep mentioning that everybody's looking for this. Look, with these fences along here. I'm not looking for it. I don't know if anybody else is looking for it, if it's here. You know, somebody comes up and says, oh, I'm looking for it. Well, you might be looking for it. That doesn't mean we're looking for it. On your second slide, not the very first slide, but your second slide, show the next slide now, third slide. See the sidewalk? That's on private property. We're not going to be able to walk that sidewalk. That's not going to be a sidewalk for the public. That's a sidewalk for the people in those houses. So you're not going to be having those sidewalks.
One of the requirements is that they grant an easement. It's
Well, yeah, and how many people are going to walk down off the road 50 feet to get on that sidewalk, to walk the length of that development, to walk back up to get on the road where there's no sidewalk?
Actually, it happens a lot.
Well, not where I'm from. Not where I'm from. People don't like it when you walk through their front yard.
Well,
Because they're not going to get there unless they walk through the front
sidewalks
yard.
are all,
So let's talk about the walking. How many, everybody under 40 years old wants to go walking. Anybody here want to go walking someplace when it's 10 below out here in the winter? I don't think I'm going to go for a walk. I think that's kind of silly. So when we put these fences in and everything, where are we going to put the mailboxes for the mailman? Mailboxes are rural delivery.
Let me add some clarification. This does not apply to residential individual residences. This
Well, you're seeing
applies-
anything that's new,
No,
anything
it's-
that's new, you said.
Subdivision and land development.
Well, if the subdivision goes in, there's gonna be people living in subdivision, that's what they're for. Where the mailbox is gonna go.
And if they
How do you
are,
know?
right.
Have you ever worked? Man, I happen to be retired postal examiner. And I know how mailboxes go in, and I know where they go in, and I know what the rules and regulations are according to the post office operation manual. And if you have curbside delivery, fill-in curbside delivery is what you put in. So you're not gonna mess with the federal government on this.
Correct, but those mailboxes would go in the road right away at that point.
Well, then, you're putting a sidewalk up. If you're putting a sidewalk up, the township ordinance has a curb requirement. Are we gonna make sure that their box is between the sidewalk and the curb, so that the mail carrier can reach that box without exiting his vehicle? Then you're gonna lose your beautiful appearance in that white fence if you have mailboxes stuck all along it. So let me just cover a few other things here. Let me go big or go home. I think that's what you guys should do. We're just proposing a horse-style fence and sidewalk from Muddy Creek Township to Jackson Township. I think we need to propose a sidewalk. Of course, it will be ADA compliant. It's got to have the slopes so people in wheelchairs can get on and off it. I think the white birch trees should be there instead of the others. White birch trees are nice, especially with a white fence. When the birch trees got the little black speckles in them, when the fence starts to deteriorate and it starts to rot, it has little brown speckles in it, it'll match the birch trees. We also need the state to provide SR19 with a bicycle lane. People under 40 like to walk, they like to ride their bicycles too. Let's put in a bicycle lane. And while we're at it, let's go for a bus lane. Let's put a bus lane up down 19 because we want to future-proof the township. So in 50 years, we have a bus lane that's already building for us. Let's not forget to put in a dog walking path, because we have dogs. And we'll put them some fake fire hydrants. So we can nice go with the township sign. We'll put the fire hydrants in, we'll put little placards on, saying, Lancaster Township dog resting spot. Now that we have all this, we can certainly go to ways that the sidewalk went from Money Creek, Jackson Township. Why don't we push for it to go all the way to Lake Erie? Get our fellow townships and communities to chip in here, and then we can run it all the way to the other end of 19 in Tampa. So now we can walk from Lake Erie to Tampa Bay on Route 19. I mean, this is what we're looking for. This is the mission group that we're all going to see. Would it be a utopia? Does this sound ridiculous? Of course it sounds ridiculous. And that's what this current proposal is, ridiculous. If you want white board fences, move the Kentucky. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Everybody else want to try and match that? So I suspect some of the solutions. There's some good comments. We're trying. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen along Route 19 over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We just don't. But we want to try and put in place some kind of a reasonable plan, a reasonable approach to manage growth, to manage what happens there, and have something at the end that this isn't chaos. And if we don't change any of the existing ordinances and zoning rules, I think we're going to have chaos. People come in and do whatever they want, and that doesn't work. It doesn't work for the neighbors that have to live next to them. It doesn't work for the rest of the residents who have to drive past it. So we're trying to come up with something that's organized and makes sense. And that's our approach. So the supervisors ultimately have the final say. They're the ones that commission the study, commission the committee to come forward with a plan. This is the plan that was given to the supervisors, and we asked them to brief us. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, well, our growth plan, or the growth plan, or this planning, is all based on the premise that this is a growing community, that this is a growing area. Pittsburgh's closing 13 schools because they don't have the students to fill the schools. Pittsburgh's not growing. Pennsylvania is growing at the rate of less than 2% population, when the average in the nation is much higher.
But if you look at
So let me finish now.
Sorry.
Let me finish. So now we're planning for growth that we may never see, that we probably won't see, not in our lifetime. I think that we're trying to gentrify this area, for lack of a better term, because somebody likes white picket fences.
Okay.
Somebody likes a few trees along the road. You go up and down 19, and he was very correct. There's a lot of areas where you can't put in a sidewalk. You can't put in fences. There's guardrails along certain areas of this township that are up against the road. We can't tear the guardrails out. So we have people jumping over guardrails and under guardrails and on guardrails to be able to walk on the sidewalk that only half the people are going to be able to build or willing to build.
It's addressed in the plan. And I'll just comment that although certain areas of this Tri-County area, southwestern Pennsylvania, may be increasing, our neighboring township, Jackson, has one of the highest development rates right now in the state. If we don't put some kind of better ordinances in this township, the developers are going to come here because it's easy and it's inexpensive to build here.
Lancaster Township, last meeting, they lamented about the lack of building permits in the township in the last year, in the last 6 months. They were expecting it to be much higher than it was. They were very disappointed in the lack of construction permits, which means their expectation, their planning, their projections were way off to the high side, not to the low side. And are we planning on something that's not gonna happen? Or are we trying to shove something down the community's throat that people don't want?
Interest rates are high right now. If they come down, I think we'll see more building go on.
A lot of it's lack of development, or developments in process, not just, many of the developments are finished and not new ones, and new ones have not
But
started.
it took over 30 years, actually close to 40 years, to get Arden's Woods completed. From the time that the plan started, and it sat for probably almost 20 years before they did anything. Then they built the first 7 or 8 houses along Saltworks with a whole different plan than what they have now. And those people that were built on Saltworks in 93 to 95, they're not even part of that, which they're so happy they're not part of that HOA and everything. So that's been a whole different plan. And also, I wanted to comment on that zoning code section 406 from the ordinances of 2008. They have all changed since then, especially when they went to E-code. So what is the ordinance that you're referring to from the E-code section?
That's the
We had this
current, that's the current ordinance. That's the
That the 406 is part of 2008, and I know things have changed because when we were discussing the comprehensive plan, that was one of the things we were trying to match up. Things weren't matching up from
Well, it
that
doesn't
ordinance.
match up, it doesn't match up because the ordinance is very hard to follow. When you find, to find this, okay requirement, the setback and all that, it's actually under the parking regulations, so it's very difficult.
They moved it to another place, is what they did. So, and because things were just were easy to find and everything in that 406, but then when they went
It's
to
very, yeah, you're right.
And then-
And that should be improved because it's hard to regulate.
and the 406 was easy to follow. I'm sorry, that zoning code from 2008 was extremely easy to follow. Now you go into this new one with the E-code, it's extremely difficult to find anything on there. Even if you search for a word, you end up with hundreds of options. Yeah, just something to think about. If you're going to reference something, please reference in the current stuff.
And anything you've done with it, you're saying you want to make it look better, I mean, down there where they got all that heavy equipment, and that looks hideous down there.
That's an example of why we're doing this, because that was not enforced the way it should have been.
Well, they just redid all that over here. Well, did that 50-foot thing go into effect there?
Should.
And you saying it wasn't enforced the way it should have been? Why wasn't it enforced?
I don't know.
Well,
You know, go back to them and say, hey, you didn't abide by
Don't-
it.
There are discussions.
Don't create
about-
more rules, enforce the ones you have.
That's part of this recommendation, is to enforce the existing setbacks and green space requirements, is a big part of it.
Well, then why don't we just enforce what we have?
They don't go far enough. Still do a lot of things that we probably don't want them to do. Trying to tighten up the
Who
regulations.
doesn't want them to do that?
The township supervisors who have asked us to do this.
Well,
They're the ones accountable, they're the ones that
that's the township who has that issue because we don't know who they are.
Okay, are there any other comments from anybody else? Appreciate your brainstorm some ideas on what we think should be included in the planned residential developments. I hate to miss something because we just follow what's there. So I'd like some fresh thoughts on things we want and don't want to see in that. We can just start with that, and once we get on this, then we'll start working on the PRD, and if we have things on the side, we can add in and take out. Sylvia already started that. Something else.
Let me back up 1 minute. To give you some clarification on the 406 section that he's referring to is codified as 300-15D4. 300-15D4 in the current code.
Okay, thanks.
Exact same language, it's just, you're right, the numbering totally changed. Within the same ordinance, just the numbering is all different. Okay, okay.
So we're going to table the rest of those things. I think it's just too long. We'll try to continue. So it's a regular meeting. I think the things we're going to be doing are more appropriate for our working meetings. And for the public, if you're not aware, we have once a month we have our planning commission meeting. That's what we're doing tonight is our normal meeting. We've agreed to meet twice a month. You're welcome to attend those also. That meeting is a working group meeting between us, looking at the ordinances, zoning, PRD, which is planned residential developments, and we work through including those, making them more stringent, trying to implement controls. You know, our goal is to not promote development, but it's going to happen, we can't stop it. But if that's the case, let's make it nice, let's make it elegant, let's manage it, make it expensive, okay? So that all of our property values increase, and the developers don't come in and just run roughshod on what we have, because we weren't planning ahead and we weren't prepared for when they come. So we want to get ahead of that. We want to get something in place that puts in more controls, manages the growth and the development more than what we have right now. That's the goal, is to be, that's the charge we have. So we're all volunteers. We've been coming in 2 nights a month instead of just a regular meeting. You're all welcome to sit in. Connie, a couple others, they come to all of our meetings and recording them. I don't know where the recordings go. Are they on YouTube or they posted somewhere? Are they?
Yep.
So if you're interested in what we talked about, what we're doing, welcome to look. I didn't know I was going to become a YouTube star, but apparently that's happened. One more item, and Mary would be upset with me. I have it right here.
When is the day of the next meeting?
Second Tuesday of the month.
I have it on the 12th, that's what I got.
The meeting's the 12th of August.
Yes, 12th of August.
Okay, that's what we're doing. So,
And the next one after that, for people's information, is the 26th. In the stack.
all right, so another order of new business is a planning letter for the township's multimodal grant application. The townships submitted a multimodal grant application for improvement of 3 roads, parts of Scott Ridge, Dogwood, and the other one is Woody Wilson. We're getting funding to improve those roadways. And they've asked the planning commission to write a letter of endorsement saying that we endorse them, submitting for the grant and we endorse the roads that they select. Where's Rockland? It's at the north end of the township, off of Pleasant Hill.
What is multimodal?
Oh, okay.
So the only local is based on the amount of traffic they get, based on the condition of the road. I believe roadmaster has a lot to do with how they prioritize those. And those are the three. There's only so much money they can get, so what the budget was to do those three roads, and now they're stuck with the plan that they can get. So there's a letter that I have already signed that says it endorsed that.
What part of Skyline Road, you know?
It doesn't say.
What was the third, was Dogwood, what was the third road? Where's that?
That's, Young Hooker, and that's, Stone Church, it's one of the ones that, is actually,
It's really actually.
The Dogwood comes off of Pleasant Hill Road, correct?
You know, Dale, I think that the last supervisors meeting, Mary said that Bellis Road, connects to Spark.
Bellis Road runs from Stockbridge down to King Run.
That's right. Well, I know.
It needs repair.
So is that the one? I don't have the letter. I apologize for that. I know those.
Dogwood kind of runs into Muddy Creek fairly quickly, I think. That road's short.
Yeah, there's a lot of
But Bellis Road does need
I think that's
repair. I mean, whatever roads they have, doesn't matter. You need so they can.
sure, I think usually, we recommend these,
Guys, look it up, let's get next meeting.
Now, is that for next year then?
for next year. Grant applications will be by the end of the month. All right, any additional comments, feedback from the participants on anything that we made, not just presentation or something?
Have we received any grants or anything yet?
I don't know that. That'll be a better question to ask the supervisors. Okay. So motion to adjourn. Second on that.
Second, that.